It begins not with a bang, not with a scream, but with a silence you've learned to live inside. You know the one. It's the silence that settles into your chest on a Sunday evening, when the light outside is fading and the week ahead looms like a wall you're not sure you have the strength to climb. You've learned to call it by other names, of course. You call it stress, or being a realist, or just the way things are. You call it the weight of responsibility, the exhaustion of ambition, the natural consequence of caring too much. But those are all just well-crafted costumes you've dressed it in, because you're afraid that if you looked at it directly, if you actually stared into its face, you'd see that what you're feeling isn't just pressure or fatigue or even anxiety. It's something far more ancient, far more patient, and far more powerful than any of those things. It's a fear that has been sitting in the passenger seat of your life for so long that you've forgotten it's even there, quietly leaning over every now and then to whisper directions to a destination you never chose. Think about the last time you made a decision that genuinely mattered. Not what to eat for dinner, not which movie to watch, but a real decision, the kind that could change the architecture of your life. Did you feel that familiar knot in your stomach? That slight pause before you committed? Now, here's the unsettling question: in that pause, whose voice did you hear? Because if you listen closely, you'll notice it's not your own. It's a voice that sounds suspiciously like your father's disappointment, or your mother's worry, or the laughter of kids from a schoolyard decades ago who are now grown and married and living lives that have nothing to do with you. It's the voice of a world that taught you, very early on, that safety is the only acceptable form of success. And you have been listening to that voice for so long that you've mistaken it for your own heartbeat. This hidden fear doesn't announce itself with cold sweats or racing pulses, not anymore. It's far too sophisticated for that. It has evolved. It has learned to dress in the clothes of pragmatism, to speak in the language of being realistic. It shows up not as terror, but as a gentle tug on your sleeve when you're about to take a risk. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And its whisper is seductive because it sounds so reasonable. It says, "Not yet. You're not ready. You need more money, more experience, more certainty. Wait until the conditions are perfect." But here's the cruel geometry of that logic: perfect conditions never arrive. They are a horizon line that retreats exactly as fast as you approach it. And so you stay. You stay in the job that drains the color from your days, in the relationship that has become a habit rather than a passion, in the city you've outgrown, in the version of yourself you built for other people's comfort. You stay, and you call it stability, but stability is just the word we use to make stillness feel like a virtue. What makes this fear so devastatingly effective is that it has colonized your imagination. You think you're dreaming, but you're actually just rearranging furniture inside a cage. When you imagine a different life, a more authentic one, do you feel a rush of excitement, or do you immediately feel a wave of exhaustion? If it's exhaustion, that's the fear at work. It has taught you to associate your deepest desires with depletion before you've even taken the first step. It has trained you to see the struggle before the possibility, the failure before the attempt, the loss before the gain. It has turned your own ambition against you, weaponizing your ability to foresee obstacles so that you use it not to plan, but to preemptively surrender. You don't move toward what you want because you've already lived the failure 1,000 times in your head, and by the time you get to the real moment of choice, you're too tired to even try. And the tragedy of this is that you believe it's protecting you. You believe that this hidden fear is a kind of guardian, a watchdog that keeps you from making catastrophic mistakes. But a real guardian doesn't starve you. A real guardian doesn't convince you that the only way to avoid getting hurt is to never fully live. This fear is not your protector, it is your jailer, and it has convinced you that the bars are there to keep danger out when in truth, they are there to keep you in. It has built a world for you where the greatest risk is not failure, but the terrifying prospect of discovering who you actually are when you stop performing for the expectations of others. You can feel it most acutely in the quiet moments, can't you? When you're alone, when the distractions fall away, when there's nothing between you and the raw data of your own existence. That subtle unease that settles into your bones isn't boredom. It's the sound of a life not lived. It's the echo of all the paths you didn't take, all the words you didn't say, all the versions of yourself you abandoned before they could even stand up. And the fear whispers that it's too late now, that the window is closed, that the life you could have had belongs to a younger, braver person who no longer exists. But that is the fear's oldest trick, its most reliable lie. It tells you that time is your enemy when in fact, time is the only thing that can set you free, because every day you remain is a day you can choose differently. Consider the mechanism of it. This fear operates through a kind of invisible architecture. It builds walls not with bricks, but with narratives. Stories you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible. I'm not the kind of person who, people like me don't, I've never been good at, these are not facts. These are incantations. You have been reciting them for so long that they have become prophecy. And the fear loves this because it gives you a sense of identity, however diminished. It's better to be a known failure than an unknown possibility, the fear argues. At least failure is familiar. At least disappointment doesn't surprise you. The fear would rather you have a predictable, manageable sadness than the wild, unpredictable chaos of a life fully lived. It has taught you that safety is the highest good, and you have accepted that trade freedom for comfort, authenticity for approval, aliveness for the illusion of control. But here is what the fear will never tell you: the cost of playing it safe is far higher than the cost of failing. Because failure, when it comes, is finite. It happens, it hurts, it leaves a scar, and then it ends. It becomes a story you tell, a lesson you carry, a piece of your history. But the cost of playing it safe is ongoing. It is paid every single day in small, imperceptible increments. It's paid in the morning when you feel that heaviness before work. It's paid in the evening when you collapse into bed feeling nothing but the exhaustion of having performed a version of yourself that doesn't fit. It's paid in the middle of the night when you wake up with a sense that something essential is missing, though you can't quite name it. The fear doesn't want you to calculate that daily cost, because if you added it up, you would see that the price of a cautious life is your entire life. It's the only currency you have, and you are spending it on the assurance that nothing terrible will happen, while everything wonderful remains just out of reach. And the cruelest part? The terrible things often happen anyway. You can build your entire existence around risk aversion, and still, life will find you. Illness, loss, heartbreak, failure, these are not the exclusive territory of the brave. They come for everyone, regardless of how small you've made yourself. So the question becomes devastatingly simple: if you are going to suffer anyway, if pain is a non-negotiable part of being human, then what are you protecting? What is the fear actually saving you from? Because it's not saving you from pain. Pain will come. It's not saving you from disappointment. Disappointment will find you. All the fear is saving you from is the chance of something more. It's saving you from the possibility of a life so fully yours that you would weep with gratitude for having lived it. And in doing so, it has convinced you that the absence of disaster is the same as happiness, when in fact, the absence of disaster is just that, an absence. It is a neutral state. It is not joy, not meaning, not the fierce, terrifying, beautiful experience of being truly alive. You have felt this fear most powerfully in the moments just before something significant was about to change. A job interview you almost cancelled. A conversation you rehearsed for weeks and then never had. A creative project you started with fire in your chest and then abandoned when it got too real, when it started to actually matter. That moment of abandon is the fear's victory. It doesn't need you to stop dreaming, it just needs you to stop acting. You can dream all day long. Dreams are safe. Dreams exist in the realm of imagination, where nothing can actually hurt you. But the moment you try to make a dream real, the fear wakes up. And it fights. It fights with your own hands, your own hesitation, your own perfectly reasonable excuses. It fights by making you forget why you ever wanted it in the first place. It fights by making the path ahead look impossibly steep while the path behind looks comfortingly familiar. It fights by weaponizing your own intelligence against you, showing you every flaw in your plan, every reason it might fail, every possible humiliation waiting at the end of your effort. And yet, the most remarkable thing about this fear is that it is not actually yours. Not originally. You inherited it, absorbed it, learned it before you had the language to question it. It was passed to you by a culture that prizes safety over meaning, by systems that need you to be compliant rather than fulfilled, by people who loved you but were terrified themselves and taught you their terror is a form of love. This fear is a hand-me-down, a piece of emotional furniture you've been carrying around for so long you've forgotten it doesn't belong to you. And somewhere, buried beneath the layers of conditioning, there is a version of you that knows exactly what it wants. That version isn't impressed by your excuses. That version isn't comforted by your safety. That version is waiting. It has been waiting for years, decades maybe, for you to finally stop listening to the borrowed fear and start listening to the voice that was yours before the world taught you to be afraid. The question is not whether you have this fear. You do. The question is not even whether it controls you, because if you're honest with yourself, you can already feel the ways it has been shaping your choices for years. The real question is whether you are willing to look at it directly. Not to fight it, not to pretend it isn't there, but to look at it with the same clarity you would look at any other obstacle. To recognize that when you feel that hesitation, that tightening in your chest, that sudden flood of reasons to stay exactly where you are, that is not wisdom. That is not maturity. That is fear, pure and simple. And fear is not a reason. It is a feeling. And a feeling, however powerful, is not a command. What would you do if you weren't afraid? It's an old question, almost a cliché at this point, but it persists because it works. Because when you ask it honestly, something in you stirs. Something that has been sleeping. Something that remembers a time before you learned to edit your desires down to what was acceptable. Ask it now. Sit with the silence that follows. Do not immediately fill it with reasons why you can't. Just let the answer rise. Let the shape of it form, however impractical, however foolish it might seem to the fear that has been sitting in the passenger seat of your life, quietly directing your path toward the safest possible destination, which is also the smallest. That stirring you felt, that quiet answer that rose from somewhere beneath the noise, hold on to that. Because what you just experienced, in that moment of honest questioning, is the sound of something that has been waiting for you. Not the fear. Not the borrowed voice. Something older, something more authentic, something that was there before you learned to be small. And the fear, of course, felt it too. In that brief moment when you let yourself imagine what you would do if you weren't afraid, the fear went silent. Not because it disappeared, but because for an instant, you stopped feeding it your attention. You stopped mistaking its whispers for your own wisdom. And in that silence, you caught a glimpse of a life that doesn't belong to the fear. It belongs to you. But here is what the fear knows that you may not have fully realized yet: that glimpse is also a threat. Because once you have seen it, once you have allowed yourself to feel the shape of a life fully your own, the fear's power begins to erode. It can no longer convince you that you are content with the cage, because now you have remembered the sky. So what does the fear do when it senses itself losing control? It escalates. It doesn't give up quietly. It has been in command for too long to simply step aside. It will try to convince you that what you just imagined was a momentary lapse in judgment, a fantasy, something that doesn't fit the reality of your responsibilities, your limitations, your very real constraints. It will bring out its heaviest artillery: guilt, obligation, the faces of people who depend on you, the memory of every time you tried something and it didn't work out. It will remind you of your age, your circumstances, the economy, the opinions of people whose approval you've been chasing since childhood. It will make the cost of change feel astronomical while making the cost of staying feel like nothing at all. And this is where most people surrender. They feel the fear escalate, they feel the weight of all those reasons pressing down, and they retreat back into the familiar discomfort of a life half-lived. They tell themselves they were being dramatic. They tell themselves that their life is fine, that they're grateful for what they have, that wanting more is a kind of ingratitude. And the fear wins another day, another year, another decade. But let's be precise about what is actually happening in that moment. The fear is not protecting you. It is not keeping you safe. It is keeping you small. And the difference between safety and smallness is the difference between living and merely surviving. Safety is having a roof over your head and food in your stomach. Smallness is believing you don't deserve to paint the walls a color you love because someone might not approve. Safety is having a steady income. Smallness is staying in a career that is slowly suffocating you because the idea of starting over feels like a death sentence. Safety is taking care of your responsibilities. Smallness is using those responsibilities as a prison you never try to escape. The fear blurs these lines deliberately, because if you could see them clearly, you would realize that you can be safe and still be free. You can meet your obligations and still honor your own soul. The two are not mutually exclusive, except in the narrative the fear has constructed to keep you exactly where you are. Think about the people you admire. Not the celebrities or the public figures, but the people in your actual life, the ones who seem genuinely alive, who have a presence that feels grounded and real. What do they have that you don't? It's not luck, not usually. It's not a lack of problems or pain. What they have is a different relationship with fear. They feel it, just as you do. They hesitate, just as you do. But somewhere along the way, they made a decision that you haven't made yet. They decided that fear is not a stop sign. It is a signal. It is information. It is the thing that shows up when you're about to do something that matters, and they have learned to recognize that the presence of fear is not evidence that they shouldn't proceed, it is evidence that they absolutely should. Fear, for them, has become a compass rather than a cage. It points toward the edges of their growth, toward the places where they are about to become more than they were. And they have learned to walk toward it, not away from it, with the same steady determination you might use to walk into the wind. It's uncomfortable, yes. But on the other side of that discomfort is a version of themselves that they would never have met if they had stayed where it was safe. You have had moments like this in your own life. Times when you pushed through the hesitation and did something that scared you. Maybe it was a difficult conversation you finally had, a trip you took alone, a creative risk you shared with the world, a boundary you set with someone who had been taking advantage of you. Remember how it felt on the other side. Not the external outcome, but the internal one. That sense of expansion, of integrity, of having honored something in yourself that the fear wanted you to bury. That feeling is your true nature. It is what you feel when you are aligned with yourself rather than with the borrowed fear. And the reason that feeling is so powerful, so unmistakable, is that it is the feeling of your own life force moving through you without obstruction. It is the sound of you becoming who you actually are. The tragedy is that most people go their entire lives experiencing that feeling only in rare, isolated moments. They treat it as an anomaly, a fluke, a moment of unusual courage that they can't sustain. But what if it's not courage? What if it's simply the natural state of a human being who has stopped listening to the fear? What if the fear is the anomaly, and the expansiveness is what you're supposed to feel most of the time? This is not to say that fear is imaginary or that it doesn't serve a purpose. Fear is real. It evolved to protect you from genuine threats. But somewhere along the way, the system got hijacked. The mechanism that was designed to keep you from being eaten by predators started being triggered by the prospect of speaking your truth, of pursuing your passion, of disappointing someone whose approval you've been conditioned to need. The fear is working with outdated software, and it's running your life on a program written by people who were terrified themselves. You don't have to keep running that program. You can, at any moment, choose to close it. But you have to recognize that it is running. You have to catch it in the act. And this is the skill that changes everything, the ability to notice the fear without being controlled by it. To feel that tightness in your chest, that flood of reasons to stay small, and to simply observe it. To say to yourself, ah, there it is. The fear. It's doing its thing. Not to fight it, not to argue with it, not to try to convince it to leave. Just to see it. Because the moment you see it, you are no longer inside it. You are outside, watching. And from that outside position, you have a choice. You can still choose to stay where you are. That choice remains yours. But now it is a choice, not an automatic reaction. And that tiny shift from reaction to choice is the crack in the fear's armor. It is the beginning of the end of its control. What you might not realize is that the fear is exhausted. It has been working overtime for years, generating scenarios, manufacturing worry, keeping you alert to every possible threat. It is a relentless system, and it never rests. But it is also, in a strange way, waiting for you to relieve it of duty. The fear does not actually want to run your life. It was never meant to. It was meant to alert you to danger and then step aside while you, the conscious part of you, made a decision. But somewhere along the way, you stopped making decisions. You handed the wheel over. And now the fear is driving, and it's tired, and it's not even qualified for the job. It doesn't know where you want to go. It only knows how to avoid collisions. So it keeps you on the same road, at the same speed, never exiting, never taking a detour, never exploring. It's not malicious. It's just doing what it was programmed to do. But you are the one who wrote the program, and you can rewrite it. There is a practice that begins in this moment, and it is simply this: when you feel the fear, thank it. Thank it for trying to protect you. Acknowledge that it has worked hard, perhaps too hard, for too long. And then, gently, tell it that you'll take it from here. That you see the danger it's pointing to, and you'll keep it in mind. But that you have somewhere to go, something to do, a life to live. And that you're going to move forward, not because you're not afraid, but because you've decided that what's on the other side of the fear is worth more than what's on this side. The fear will resist this at first. It will raise its voice. It will show you new dangers, new reasons to stop. But you don't have to stop. You just have to keep moving, one step at a time, with the fear in the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. Let it shout. Let it wave its arms. You can hear it without obeying it. You can feel it without being ruled by it. And as you take those first steps, the small ones, the manageable ones, the ones that don't require you to quit your job or burn your life down, something remarkable will happen. The fear will begin to quiet. Not because you convinced it, but because you showed it something it couldn't argue with: evidence. Evidence that you can move toward what matters and still survive. Evidence that the catastrophe it predicted did not come to pass. Evidence that on the other side of the hesitation is not destruction, but life. More life than you had before. And the fear, for all its noise, cannot argue with lived experience. It can only make predictions. And once you start disproving those predictions, one by one, its credibility erodes. It becomes the relative at the dinner table whose warnings you smile at politely before doing what you were going to do anyway. You can still hear it. You just don't organize your life around it. This is the slow, quiet work of reclaiming yourself. It does not happen in a single heroic moment, though there may be moments that feel heroic. It happens in the accumulation of small rebellions against the fear. The conversation you don't postpone. The idea you don't dismiss. The risk you take that no one else will even notice, but that you know required something from you. Each one of these is a thread pulled from the fear's garment. And one day, perhaps sooner than you expect, you will realize that you are wearing something else. Something that fits. Something that was always yours, waiting in the closet while you wore the fear's hand-me-downs out of habit. You will look back at the version of yourself who was controlled by that hidden fear, and you will feel something closer to tenderness than judgment. That version was doing the best they could with what they knew. But you know more now. You know that the fear is not your master. You know that it was never supposed to be. And you know that the life you've been waiting for is not something that happens to you, it is something you choose, again and again, in the face of everything that tells you to stay small. So the question is no longer whether the fear exists. It does. The question is not even whether it controls you. It has, up to this moment. The question is what you will do now that you've seen it. Not in some abstract, philosophical way, but in the next hour, the next day, the next decision that brings that familiar tightening to your chest. Will you hand the keys back to the fear, or will you keep them in your own hands, trembling though they may be? Because the keys are already in your hand. They have always been in your hand. You just forgot you were holding them. And the door you've been standing behind, waiting for permission to walk through, was never locked. It was only fear telling you it was locked. And now you know. Now you know.